So I'm just back from my second day in hospital, and I have a cast from here down. You can see where the doctors cut off my turtleneck. I have a cast going down because I broke two bones, and the rotation, or the ball in the elbow, moved over after it was broken, and so it's going to need to be moved back and pinned in place with surgery. And the question is, how does this get to this point? And there's a constellation of fear, a constellation of loneliness, a constellation of pain around loneliness, a constellation of fear of that pain. And it builds up over time in different ways. As a child with two unemotionally available parents, and periodically subjected to whippings and beatings and things like that, I developed some degree of PTSD, some terror, some loneliness around the fact that there's nothing more horrifying than desperately needing protection from a provider and instead being afraid of them and needing to participate in the regular violation of one's own boundaries in order to make the violator more comfortable, so that they won't beat me, so that they will not hate me. Because the worst part of abuse and emotionally unavailable parents is the loneliness, the desperate need for love and belonging, Maslow's third hierarchy of need, the need that secures the others. If you are well loved and you belong, as a general rule, you will survive and be secure in that survival. If you are not, then it's very up for grabs whether or not the survival or security at some point will fall away. And I'm getting a little dizzy at this point. But that's the beginning of the desperate need for love and belonging. It's also the beginning, as a child, in breaking the healthy warrior, the healthy part that says, hey, this is crazy, I'm not going to do this, but we can still be friends, or no, you can't do this, this is the way to treat me, but we can still have a healthy relationship. It breaks that part, because as it speaks up in the infant, it gets knocked down by a parent in a sociopathic state, and the child learns that it's more dangerous to assert and stick up for oneself than it is to collapse, than it is to allow the violation. Because when a dysfunctional parent who cannot be functional has a powerlessness and rage dynamic, meaning they feel powerless, and so they express rage. That's a natural antidote to powerlessness, extreme domination and exertion. When a child is in that situation, it creates a dynamic where the child starts participating in the abuse so as not to experience the rage. And this is for a couple of reasons. One is sympathy for the parent, because beneath rage is both powerlessness and terror. And a child can feel that and care about that in the parent and wants to reduce the rage and the terror. Now, when you have an incompetent parent who feels shame when you try to coach them on how to respond to you, meaning in a shame-based culture, if you make a mistake, you're a bad human being. And that's the reason that when you communicate you made a mistake, the message of I'm a bad human being is an intolerable message. And so the response is rage and attack, which is very easy when the, quote, adversary is a 2-year-old infant communicating that this is not right, or they need it to be held in a different way, or they're scared of the dog that keeps knocking them over, etc. So then you have the conflict between wanting to please and make the parent feel pleased, having an incompetent parent, and the parent regularly violating various boundaries, psychologically, physically, and psychologically and physically. Then you've got the situation: is it worth speaking up to educate the parent on how to be more responsive? Because this is the survival bottleneck, the question in the traumatized child is my life more in danger from the periodic beatings and attacks and molestations of various natures? Or is my life more in danger if I am hated and punished by my parent for standing up for myself? This is an unknown equation. The child is caught between the one and the other. There's no relief, which leads to chronic fear. I held it in my low back and in my legs, just chronically feeling like it would, can I speak up about this? Can I have feelings about this? Can I say that doesn't work for me here? Or is that going to be too much for my abuser? Is that going to be too much such that he won't connect with me at all after that, such that she won't love me at all, as opposed to the bits and pieces that come my way? So which is it going to be? Getting to exist and getting to feel emotionally, or getting to be accepted and to belong to an abusive family? Well, growing up in that fear dynamic, it's one of the biggest things and it's one of the biggest griefs and vulnerabilities. It really knocks down the healthy protector. I remember a moment in time where I had a back spasm. This is from feeling unsupported, that tightness. So I have the back spasm because of this clenching pattern which develops in childhood. The body holds the terror that the parent won't be responsible for, that the parent does not want to see. So I had this tension which would give me, periodic back spasms, and so I can't finish one of my landscape jobs, which means that I can't get paid, which means that I can't make my truck payment. This was about 20 years ago or so when I was, leasing, rent. I got a truck loan and was paying off my first truck. So I can't do it. And so I call my bank and I say, I can't make my loan payment. And they say, well, you need to make your loan payment. And I said, well, the only way that I can make my loan payment is if I don't eat. Do you think I should eat, or do you think I should make my loan payment? Because I need the bank's approval. Because I can't let them down and break my word without their permission. I need to know that they'll still like me at the bank. I need to know that I won't be hated at the bank, because that loneliness of being alone and misunderstood and unsupported and hated is more painful than this wound. Now, this elbow wound, a disc, a bone broken and pivoting, this wound is bigger than, most physical pain wounds can be. So I'm up in an 8.7 out of 10 pain point. And so it's absolutely, horrible. And yet the pain of this physical wound is so little compared to the psychological wound of being alone and misunderstood and invisible and hated and punished and misunderstood and having no one to comfort me in that place. I would take this wound any day over the grief and the smallness, the feeling like I just can't fit any smaller between those two places. I would take this pain any day. And thankfully, my bank gave me permission to eat rather than pay back the loan that month. And I was so relieved that they took the pressure away from that crevice that I have lived in emotionally my entire life. The loneliness that doesn't have a place to exist in this cult, in this culture. Not one human being wanted to come down and feel that terror. Not as a 5-year-old, not as an 8-year-old, not as a 10-year-old. And it is so painful, so terrifying in its pain and its exhaustion, that the fear is of facing it again. That is my greatest fear, of being put in these situations where I'm invisible and I'm violated, or I'm not, and someone hates me. Everyone disowns me. Everyone dissociates, and I'm all alone, feeling in that small space that there's no space in that for me to be loved, for me to be seen, that no one has space to see that domain. The sadness for me is being pushed into these corners. That's the sadness. And, where is this cast now? How does this come into being? Well, 15 years ago, I came across the house that I'm in now. And it was the perfect house. A little more than I wanted to spend, but it had vaulted ceilings. And it felt a bit temple-like, and it was quiet, something that I need as a sensitive. It was quiet, with views of trees. And so, even though it was and I needed the double-car garage for my work, and so I took the house. And I was looking for houses with double-car garages. And it comes time to move in, and the landlord has left a motorcycle in the garage with a few other things. The main reason I got the place was for my tools, and I don't want to be responsible for scraping his motorcycle. I don't want the motorcycle there. And I contact the landlord. He's like, do you want to cancel the lease? Of course I can leave my motorcycle in the garage. It's like, Billy, this isn't in the lease terms. This isn't. He said, well, what do you want to do? You want to cancel the lease? I said, Billy, I don't want to cancel the lease. I want you to get your fucking motorcycle out of my fucking garage. But I can already see his personality type. He's just waiting to flip out and fight over nothing. Who knows what happened to him in his childhood? And I said, Billy, I don't want to cancel the lease. I'm not trying to be difficult. I rented this place precisely because it had a garage. I'm going to damage your motorcycle. He says, well, why don't you build a cage around it? I said, I don't want to build a cage. I want the space. I would really appreciate. You see, this is the collapse of the warrior. You see? Basic decency, he wants to pull the rug out. This is the family pattern. You confront dad. Hey, stop hitting me for stuff I didn't do. Hey, cut it out over here. Oh, that's how you want to play it. You want me to punch you up? You want me to do this? No, I fucking don't want you to punch me up. I want you to behave like a fucking adult. Preferably before having a child you're not capable of raising. That's what I'd like. But you're too dumb to realize that you're dumb. You can't even grasp what a burden you've placed on all of your children because you're so sociopathic and self-centered. Which means that it's all about you. So suck it up. Placate the abuser. Who the hell wants to get up and hire a moving company after moving because some dumbass fuck doesn't grasp the idea that when you rent a house in a garage, you're not renting it filled with their shit? And who the hell doesn't want to say, gee, you're right, I've got tons of spaces to put a motorcycle somewhere other than this garage. And I will do that. For one, sell the fucking thing if you're not going to use it. Anything. So I have to apologize and hold the fear again. And the question is, where does it fucking end? Where does it end? With women with whom I desperately needed deep emotional, secure relationships, it's the same fucking thing. I'd like to have a long conversation with you about boundaries, about needs. I'd like to understand you. It's like, no. Let's just play it by ear. My first girlfriend was a bully. Of course she wanted to play it by ear. What playing it by ear meant, it meant that every single time we'd go and do something where there was, of course, the nature of individuality, a divergence of her preference for music and my preference for music, or her preference to head home later or my preference to head home sooner, etc., etc. Her policy was to bully. Go into this, I'm going to hate you, I'm going to punish you, I'm going to have a tantrum. I'm going to criticize, I'm going to raise my voice, if I don't get what I want. And the fact that it's not what you need or want, it doesn't really enter into it all that much. She's the first woman. You see, this is part of the residual effect. These terrifying situations in childhood make going out and bonding with other human beings in the same culture a terrifying prospect. So I've stayed out of romantic relationships until I'm 26 years old because I didn't want to deal with the shit. This is the first woman who has consciously initiated, expressed attraction, expressed, desire, invited relationship. And she'd spent time with 100 lovers so far. She was 58 years old. Reasonable age to have some experience, pretty good communicator. Just a bully when she's unconscious or when she's scared, which is about 20% of the time. But when it's 20% of the time with someone that can't communicate when it's going to come up, and that doesn't care enough about the other person to understand their history, their needs, common decency, then I've got the burden of figuring out when that 20% of the time is going to hit. I can't figure it out. It seems to be whenever she gets vulnerable. She's got to do something to attack me. Well, I can't predict when is she going to be vulnerable, one, and two, the vulnerability is what I want. And so I have to create all of these contracts, like every time we leave the house. Okay, so Alicia, you want to go out and outing, I get it. So let's script this out a little bit. So we're going to get in the car, you're going to drive, you're going to go downtown, we're going to stop here, we're going to so let's fast forward 3 or 4 hours down the road and I want to go home. What's your stance on this? Is this an outing where you're going to stay as late as you damn well please? Or is this an outing where when I want to go home, you're going to bring me back home? Because if we take your car, I'm stranded. And that doesn't seem to bother you. So I've got to work this out in advance. So every outing is a contract. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to listen to this music, so that I don't have to face this terrain. The terrain of an unconscious dominating individual demanding that I violate my own needs, boundaries, and preferences, or be hated and attacked in a way that hits that sore panic button. The remains of undiagnosed, unresolved PTSD in a culture that up until this point does not bother to tell me what PTSD is. The symptoms are there. Anyone who knew me could say, hey, Dane, you have some traumatic symptoms and here's what you do about it. But nobody did know me. And if they did, it's not my problem is the American ethic of how to maintain, a highly dysfunctional culture in which everyone sees everyone else's problems and does very little about it. So I leave that relationship and I start work with the Human Awareness Institute, which is all about stating boundaries and requests, and it's useful technology, these first few workshops. It's useful technology to state 100% and requests and boundaries and the needs and preferences and all of that. It's great technology. The trouble is, what my 100% is that's not the trouble. But what my 100% is to see another human being clearly enough and be seen clearly enough that I'm not regularly thrown into this pit of past traumas through various triggers, mostly the emotional outbursts of women who find themselves in uncomfortable and unfamiliar terrain, and who find that the easiest thing is to turn their fear and their pain into anger and blame and throw all of that at me with the general idea that men are not good things, particularly when they're angry at me. And there's no defense. You take an exploding woman and say, could you pause right there? And it's the same thing. Oh, you're expressing a healthy boundary? Let me really give it to you. Let me tell you what a shit you are, blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to use physical violence. I'm competent. I've got the body, the know-how. I can take someone down very easily. But I don't want to. I don't want to be feared again. I don't want to be hated again. And so I try and avoid these types of women by screening. How about having a conversation about what we really want on a first or second date? How about having a conversation on an online profile where I say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And how about having a profile like that will tell someone exactly who I am perfect for? But the women in the United States apparently do not like hearing what someone likes and what someone dislikes. And so I discover, to my great helplessness, there's still that constant yearning. Please make a safe, secure, emotional place where I can have all of my feelings and all of my needs, and I can be seen and not be hated and not be abandoned and not be punished. Please, can one fucking individual work with me? I'm willing to work. I'm willing to spend money. Can we make that a reality so that I'm not constantly living in terror? A body residue that I have no conscious control over. Believe me, I know mentally that these situations have largely changed. But knowing that mentally has zero impact on the fact that I feel 5 years old when I'm being hated. And in the 5-year-old's reality, being hated by mom is a killer. It's life-threatening. So, and I'll just pause very briefly to talk about the endless stream of advice and therapy, and just conclude it with a few statistics. I've been to 40 practitioners. I've spent well over $150,000. I've spent well over 2,000 hours in meditation. I've read well over 700 books. I've tried the diets, blah, 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 just to give you a very side thing for the typical defense in this culture. When people see me in pain, they cannot wait to give me advice that has no basis in diagnosis. They don't ask what has worked for you or not. They don't say, let's sit down and learn about you. As soon as the grief and the pain emerges, they throw their little bits of information darts that tell me that I'm doing it wrong and that all I have to do. Now I want you to pause for a moment and imagine that you've spent 200 grand doing hundreds of all these all one has to do type of things and felt depressed, sometimes worthless, very tired, lonely, because the people who say all you have to do, they never come around, or if they do, they're coming around for praise. So the raw food vegan diet folks, if they say, well, how's it going with the raw food vegan diet? Yeah, indigestion, increased farting, tastes like shit. I felt a little fuzzy up in my head. Well, we've got to go. You've got to go. Until the next raw foodie points out, well, you did it wrong. You see, you should have done it for months. You should have farted for months. You did it wrong, you idiot. It's like, come on, let's do it again. Why don't you pay more for crappy food for months? And then, okay, so we do that. Do they want to hear how it got wrong? Oh, no, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but I have the secret. You see, you have to buy this brand. And then the next person has the secret as well. There has never been an advice giver among the potpourri of advice givers who gather zero information before pouring out their unsolicited wonder cures. There has never been an advice giver that stuck with the program, that said, I'm sorry, I didn't learn about your body before that advice. I'm sorry you wasted the money. I'm sorry I made you feel dumb. I'm sorry I didn't bother to learn about this and this. I'm sorry I'm not all that interested in you, because what I want is to hear how great I am for my great ideas, which are hip and popular, like hemp seed oil, hemp seed this, hemp seed baseball caps. It's like the new thing. Or the therapists that say, well, I can really help you with this. And then with a resigned sigh, some 5, 10, 20, 100 sessions later, well, most people can grow and cure from my fabulous repertoire of therapeutic techniques. But I guess most people aren't quite as dumb as you. So off you go. I'm sorry you're too dumb to benefit from my great wisdom. I have to go convince the next few people that I'm going to cure them. Otherwise, why will they show up to talk about difficult things and pay me money and drive to my house? So off I go with that. And so there's this endless abandonment and this endless pulling. I want to look good. I want to give good advice. I don't want to go to the trouble needed to give good advice, but I want to be told that I give advice, whether I give it or not. And my strategy is simply that every time my advice doesn't work, I will not listen and learn from it. And every time my advice does work, I will reaffirm what a great advice giver I am and just keep doing it. And so this cycle continues with the grief, the fatigue, the money spent, the sense of it's my fault. Because when you have dysfunctional parents, that's what they always drum into you. Why should you be beaten? Because you told me that you don't like to be beaten? Because you are a bad child and you're talking back to your parents. So, clearly, if you tell me not to beat you, I've got to beat you because the first beating wasn't good enough. And I would be derelict in my responsibility. You have to know this will hurt me more than it will hurt you. Let's ask you to go insane as well, because if this is really true, well, I've got wonderful solutions for you, Mom and Dad. I've got pent-up rage up the wazoo. Just give me the belt, and I will hit you, and you will know that you are really punishing me. Because when I hit you, it will hurt me more than it will hurt you. I mean, sure, you may be bleeding and this and that and the other and feel like shit as a human being and blah, blah, blah. But you will have known that you will have hurt me even more than that, and you will be suffering on my behalf, for my interest. That would be a natural solution to this absurd request that not only should our children be beaten, but they should go insane so that the most abusive parents can feel noble about their abuse. How much more narcissistic does it get? So the 100% that I have that I started looking for was emotionally mature, present women of any body type and any age, of any religion and any political party, with any kind of job, who had quality time and who understood the kindness and intelligence of beginning with a detailed conversation about our needs, about our lifestyle that brought out the best in us, about a conscious relationship culture that worked, that didn't deteriorate into these traumatic cycles. How many women does it take to find one that says, yes, that's for me? It's about 1 in 400 Americans. 1 in 400. So all you have to do, little regressed, wounded child, is be rejected, ignored, and criticized by 400 women before one says that's a good idea. And she's not thrilled at doing the work. She may ruffle her feathers a bit. This is not terribly romantic. I'm waiting to be swept off my feet. Swept off your feet by a man you know nothing about? Swept off your feet by someone whose traumatic patterns you do not even have language for, let alone to understand and know how to respond to? Swept off your feet from someone who does not want to have children because he doesn't believe in repeating the intergenerational abuse cycle, not because he's afraid of commitment, but because he's afraid of making another child feel as painful as he felt when he was young. You'd like to be swept off your feet with one of those men, would you? And what do you do when you discover, surprise, surprise, that this man who has swept you off your feet is not the man you imagined that you would like to be swept off your feet by? Because you didn't ask, you didn't speak, and you didn't know anything about them. I do not want to be the man blamed on the other side of that saga. So how about an unromantic conversation that is humane, that is decent, that is kind? I'm waiting to be swept off my feet by the perfect one. Or I guess we'll do it if you insist, if they're swept off their feet and drawn to me, etc. But it's painful to realize that even the most intelligent solutions receive lackluster enthusiasm from the people they benefit the most. It's not very much fun being a bully. It's just better than being terrified. Well, what if you could eliminate both the terror and the bullying through conscious awareness? Wouldn't that be fun? Not apparently as much fun as not preparing, not studying, and blaming the other person when things go wrong. I don't want to blame the other person when things go wrong. So why don't we just say we're not going to create it going wrong by having this conversation, and then if it turns out that we do want different things, we will simply bow and go to the next 1 out of 400 before the one emerges. Well, all that rejection is, of course, absolutely miserable. It's very lonely. One of the most lonely things is understanding that, through all this abuse and trauma, I do pretty well. The women who set us up to fail by not talking are sometimes emotionally traumatized by the necessary end of the relationship. Now, they wanted it to go naturally, and they wanted it to be played by ear. But they wanted a technique that doesn't work to result in a compatible relationship, when the odds against that are less than 2%. So they want to use a technique that has a 98% chance of failing, and then blame their partner when the pain of failure erupts into the relationship, or they want to blame themselves, or both, none of which I want anything to do with. It's not fun to see someone blaming themselves. If I leave them because they refuse all of the things that to me set a relationship up to succeed, and they're devastated. But they could have easily learned what was needed to succeed before we formed the relationship. I'd rather have the conversation. It's not that I think it's romantic to have rational conversations prior to becoming emotionally and sexually attached. I just think it's kind. And I can't even bend over, but I have a book that I wrote to help solve this. 300 pages about the patterns of relationship that work very well for me. 300 pages of, by contrast, what does not work well. Women that I've had exceptional relationships with. Women that I've had terrible relationships, spelled out in detail to help someone understand. The problem with the American woman, she does not want to read the book. It is unromantic. It's not natural. Now, when she goes to buy a TV, she will study the Amazon reviews. She will read the specs. I want a 4K TV. I'm not going to therefore wait until the first salesman comes along and says, buy the wonder TV of your life, only to discover that it's analog. No, she studies the specs of just about anything, except the most important set of specs of her entire life, her primary partner. She wants to just be surprised. Will it be a 10-inch TV or a 56-inch TV? Will it be color or black and white? Will it result in this type of movie being played on it or this type? Let's find out. The adrenaline rush of being swept off one's feet. Well, particularly when one's warrior is crushed somewhat, particularly when there's this unmet need for a safe place to learn and speak my feelings. There's no way for that protocol to actually work. And my physical pain is present, so I'm adjusting my arm so to take some of the pressure off. But this pain is nothing compared to the pain of the helplessness of being stuck in these positions. So back to the arm. What's going on in my life today that makes me feel small, terrified, and alone? I was sexually abused by my therapist, and nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to understand. People want to disown me because I'd like to be heard. And that's lonely. That's a reenactment by the healer that I paid thousands of dollars to, of the wound, as part of the problem that I'm paying those monies to hope to sort out, to learn about. And what did I find in the therapy session? It was a psychedelic session the second time around. I found that he'd hurt me the first time around, and he didn't want to talk about it. I found that he had blind spots, and he didn't want to see them. I found that it was more important for him to look good in his own way than to take care of my well-being and my interest. And I found that he got very angry and blamed me. At one point even commenting that he felt like killing himself and he felt like killing me. Good on candor, not the safest therapeutic relationship. Well, after participating in a saga that gave me PTSD, that caused me more emotional pain, etc. in my adult life than I've found in any other place, him and a cadre of other therapists, some of which were more intimate with me than him, decided that this was not the issue, that this was in some ways my fault, nothing to do with them. And that even after admitting the abuse, that it wasn't worth a refund, that the people who recommended an unlicensed therapist to do all of this, various mistakes and abuse, were not going to apologize or give me the direct help that I asked for. Instead, they were going to give me the help that they needed by asking me to sign a legal contract promising never to sue them and never to tell anyone what happened when my therapist escalated a sexual relationship under the influence of psychedelics and charged me $175 an hour to do so, and then told me it was my fault when I started to go crazy, trying to be liked, trying to keep his secret, trying not to find myself feared and hated again by someone I desperately needed to love me, to accept me, to see me, and fight for my truth, not fight my truth and request or demand collusion with their bullshit, to fight for my goodness and my truth, my dignity, rather than to fight my truth and my dignity and demand fealty to their delusions of grandeur, their shame, their incompetency. And this put me in the most lonely situation of my entire life. It was so painful and so lonely I couldn't work. My health collapsed. I lost 50% or more of my energy. I couldn't sleep regularly. And this was all fine, as long as they didn't have to pay the price. Of course, when I put up a website talking about some of these events, it wasn't a high issue. That's the name of the organization, the Human Awareness Institute. It wasn't a high issue. It wasn't a high issue to see me. It wasn't a high issue to get me adequate care. It wasn't a high issue to apologize. But it was a high issue to sue me to shut down the website that I built because they refused to tell their community that there was a threat in their own protocol that could harm others, and that this was a learning opportunity, but only if it was brought forth. Now, I lost my community. Admittedly, not a huge loss, because in more than 100 events, I could not find the language, the communication, the technology to understand many of these patterns. I participated in many traumatic relationships in high, some in which I traumatized others, some in which I was traumatized with no language. Because in high's words, trauma is not a high issue. Their issue is having healthy relationships. That's a high issue. But the trauma that ruins those healthy relationships is not a high issue. So it's schizophrenic, and they don't like hearing what they're doing wrong. And so it's the same thing with the landlord. Would you mind possibly? Would you mind taking my money to learn how you could apologize to me a little better? Okay, if you pay us $175 an hour, we'll listen to whatever you have to say. But at the end of it all, there's not really anything to apologize for. So you want to try and convince us again to apologize with another $175? We can book another session, but it's getting a little bit much here, And so, again, can I be a decent, healthy human being and still be loved and accepted in an unhealthy culture? Apparently not. Apparently not. The cost has always been not speaking the obvious truth. If it hurts you more than it hurts me, why don't you give me the whip? If Waldorf schools are so fucking great, why is loneliness and fear my dominant emotion since birth in this family? If you're such great parents, why are 3 of your 5 children suicidal after all of your great bountiful gifts? Could we talk about that? I didn't think so. I don't get to exist unless I lie to you and say the things you demand me to say before you're willing to grant them some reality. And I don't like that. I don't want to fight. I've lost some of that warrior, and so I walk away from my family. The grief of having no family, because there's no one who will champion the most profound and relevant emotional truths in that family. They will not champion them in themselves, and they will not champion them in me. Now, they reach out, of course, from time to time. Welcome back to the delusion. Welcome back to Mr. Happy Face. Welcome back into that world that is so lonely and invisible that it's not enough to not see you. That's a start, and we appreciate not seeing you because we never did want to see you and we never wanted to feel any of your feelings. It's a start, but it's not enough. First, you have to bury deeply who you are. But that's a little bit boring. There's nothing there now. So we want you to fabricate the exact opposite. We want you to talk cheerfully about how intelligent we are in the areas we're most insane. We'd like you to go insane, and we'd like you to be cheerful about it. Now, if you can manage that, to bury who you are, to ignore your deepest emotional pains, to reenact the abuse cycle, and to tell us how wonderful we are, we've got a place for you waiting. You have no idea how welcome you will be in this family. We'll come and pick you up at the airport for that one. But after decades of making some effort from time to time to speak the truth only to have the door shut, I'm left in an insane world. We want you, Dane. Not the you that you are, but the you that we'd like you to be. We want that. We don't want who you actually are, but we so want you, which is, of course, salt in the wound. The words I'd love to hear more than anything else, the reality that is most lonely, the reality in which I not only don't get to exist, but I am praised and loved for pretending to be who I'm not. Well, the high debacle, the trauma, the residual effect. My finances are reduced 40 to 60% as a chronic state because of this and that and the other. The house that I wanted to build got set back by the landlord. Well, I should say another way. The house I wanted to build, I couldn't build, fighting 4 of my therapists, holding the family grief that doesn't resolve, feeling the loneliness in a culture in which the things that seem to work the most in relationship are precisely the things that are unpopular. It is the easiest thing in the world to have a one-night stand with an American woman that is guaranteed a high odds of doing more damage than well-being in one way or another, and has a 99% chance of never leading to something else. That's easy. How many rejections do I have to go through to find one human being who says, ooh, a 5 or 6 hour conversation about really important stuff on a first date or so? I like it. A book? Good idea. Let me write my own. How many people does one have to go through before the ideas that actually work are welcome, have a home, and are appreciated? And where the ideas that are not working are viewed as the enemy, rather than the people who will not use the status quo ideas that don't work being viewed as the enemy. It's a miserable backward turn. Thanks, Mom, for giving me this deep need for attachment. Thanks, culture, for giving me human beings who seem incapable, unwilling, apprehensive about forming attached relationship, and have no idea how to systematically go about seeing and being seen in the order that is intelligent, because it works. I have women who tell me they are just getting over a 6-month nightmare. Betrayed, terrified, they lost their jobs, their self-esteem is shot, blah, 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 because they wanted to relate to a stranger. And the same woman who spent 6 months, you say, well, how about we do it in a way that works? I want to have a 6-hour conversation with you before we sleep together. Oh, that sounds like a lot of work. More work than 6 months, really? Oh, yeah, it's just too much work. It's a joke. And it's like, do you understand how dumb you are? Do you understand how insane you are when you're living the consequence of the status quo and you're offered an alternative? Well, this gets them mad. How dare you? How dare you insinuate you don't know me at all? You don't know anything about me. Oh, so I'm being attacked for pointing out the obvious. I see. Well, at least that has helped me understand that we're not going to be a good fit. But how sad when bringing a gift of research and technology to be punished for offering an effective way of doing things that, yes, might be a little bit more work than falling into bed and drunk on a first or second date, but will save you that 6 months of grief. Every investor knows the mantra, protect the downside. First, protect the downside. My downside is I won't enter into a relationship if I do not have the presence of mind in a partner that is willing to negotiate a clean, loving, and safe ending of that relationship should either of us decide to end it, to avoid the common torment of just being texted. So that's my guideline. The only trouble, it works very, very well. I've had some magnificent relationships with magnificent endings that were healing and beautiful for both sides. It's just that almost all women attack the idea of having an ending conversation on a first or second date. And it is critical to be objective in the ending conversation that you have the conversation prior to becoming hormonally and physically attached, hormonally and emotionally attached. You've got to have it first when you have some objectivity. But they have no interest in you when they're not attached. Meaning as soon as a woman has experienced physical and emotional attachment, she wants to, first of all, not have the conversation because she doesn't want the relationship to end. But secondly, if she does have the conversation, she wants to say everything that she thinks I want to hear. And thirdly, if she says, Dane, here's how you have to end with me. You have to always be my friend and blah, 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 blah. And I say, well, I'm not going to do that. Because the reason this relationship will end, if it ends, is because we are incompatible friends. There's much higher likelihood, since I don't have a sexual type, that if we end, it's because you're not a good friend for me, which means you have to understand what friendship is. So if we stop having sex, which probably feels good, but we're not a compatible friend match because that's why it feels bad, then why would I carry on the relationship not as a lover, which feels good, in the one area that we are incompatible? So I will not be friends with you. And so now what are you going to do with the fact that you are attached to me being your friend? And I don't want to hurt your feelings, and I don't want to be cruel. So why can't you fucking make the time to learn this first? Why turn me into your abuser again? Why do you have to do it? And I would take, this would be so easy for me if we were dealing with 1 in 10. Meaning if 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 women were sane and responsive to rationality and data of this nature, this would be a snap. But the data basically lines up in my world, in my eyes, is that for a good relationship to work, you've got to have a good ending agreement. You've got to spend an average of 4 hours a day of quality time. You've got to study and learn in various areas that we don't teach in this culture: sexual abuse, trauma, this, that, and the other. We've got to take time to see one another. We've got to actively nurture and build the relationship. And we've got to invest an equal amount of heart, mind, and body energy. It can't be an all mental relationship. It needs to have play and affection and good food. It needs to have time to process the meta-conversation. It needs that in an isolated and dysfunctional culture such as our own to be beautiful. Well, we're back to the 1 in 400 who is wanting that, who says, yes, great idea. And it's the idea that I'm interested in. I will pick a fat, let's be honest, a fat, elderly woman with some different views than mine who wants that over some pert-bodied, gorgeous diva whose script for relationship has a 98% chance of failing in creating the secure emotional attachment, blah, 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 the quality time, the trust, the trustworthiness, the conscious culture, the growing value, the deep and meaningful friendship, etc., the spiritual growth that I'm interested in creating. All of this sets a tone where I have right now a client who constantly pushes. Let's have more of this and more of that and more of this and more of that. And every time I say, he's got this worked up energy about it. He's being ripped off. He's being so ripped off. And so he's got this feeling, and I want to help him feel cared for. So I do more for free. But then the free stuff isn't up to his standards. I thought you graciously received a gift. No, it's not that. He has his reasons for all of it. But after giving him $3,000 in mostly invisible gifts, because people like that, if you point out, I'm doing this and that and the other for you, they say, oh, I don't want you to do that for me, blah, 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 blah. But I can't pay for this. It's like you're constantly upping, it's like this huge emotional trauma to do business in a normal way. So that affects us. So we do more. We try and soothe this. But it never ends. The abusive cycle of, I can't stand this. This is wrong, and I'm not going to do this and this and this. But other than that, it's great. It's always this kind of little promise at the end. But it doesn't work. And so, I've been pushed into a state of some bitterness and some hurt. Particularly when I listen to his wife cry, something I don't have to listen to with most clients in a first design meeting. I listened to his wife cry. I listened to several of his tantrums. And then I begin to communicate just how off-center the whole relationship has gotten. They're like, we don't want to hear your feelings. That's unprofessional. It's professional for us to cry and have tantrums, but it's not professional for you to have feelings of your own about any of this. And we're being ripped off and all this. And it's just so sad. But it's back into that same domain, like how small and invisible do I need to get? And they're like, well, if you didn't like it, you didn't have to work for us. And it's like, yeah, and this is also the compounding effect because, a few years ago, I turned away half of the work coming, and I screened clients pretty well. But the sexual abuse and trauma from the high facilitators has diverted 70% or so of my attention away from growing a business to coping with shame, coping with trauma, coping with the hurt and the pain and the sleeplessness and all that. And my work has actually gone down. And so I feel a little hooked. Like, when Josh said, it's like, this would have gone better if you'd been supervising more. I agreed with him. It's like, yes, you are a very self-centered, very pushy, very, unpleasant client to work for a lot of the time. But you're right. If I had not been sexually abused, if I was not left to deal with trauma on my own in a cult that just clams up and says nothing. It's like I can go to 300 bars within easy driving distance, 300 ways to manage addiction and pain. But there is not a single group meeting to heal sexual abuse and trauma anywhere around. Well, 300 ways to manage pain, no ways to heal the pain. It's a weak framework in the culture. So, and I could start a group on my own, but then good Americans wouldn't come. I've started groups, before, and so there's again the sadness around that. And so, this is painful. Going back to my landlord, he's a cheap son of a bitch. Well, he's not a son of a bitch, but he's cheap. And he's too cheap to bring a helper to replace the washing machine. He's too cheap to buy a new washing machine, so he keeps replacing old washing machines with old washing machines. And you already have guessed his modus operandi with the motorcycle thing. If you don't like it, move out. If you don't want to move out immediately because I've arrived one-handed with a bad back with a 300-pound Washington washing machine that could have been installed, simply, then just move out. So I try and, it's like, can I build an emotional rapport with my landlord? And he likes wasting money doing stuff himself. So how do you, I'd like to be able to say, hey, Billy, let's have a great relationship. Why don't we talk about some of your pain points, this, that, and the other? Every single time I have an intelligent opening with my landlord, he goes silent, ensuring that intelligent communication cannot occur. What is left? His form of unintelligent communication, ignoring emails, blah, 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 blah. So all intelligent communication is blockaded. And so anyway, he shows up on a Sunday with his crappy, dusty secondhand washing machine to replace the last crappy, dusty secondhand washing machine. And I don't feel like being invited to move from an otherwise lovely home for pointing out the absurdity. He doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to do that, he wants me to stand in this way and that way, etc. I'm tired of his temper, his irrational temper. It's like you do something nice for him, sometimes he'll say, oh, this is going to cost me so much money. It's like, could we slow that down and look how this saved you money here? No, it's costing me money. What money? Wow, this is outrageous. He just changes the subject and so that he can criticize something else. It's the same fucking pattern. I don't want to have a fight. I'm dealing with an insane bully who doesn't want to admit that they're an insane bully and who lays out their terms. It's this or nothing. Well, I have nothing to do with my landlord 99% of the time, and so I put up with these little things, but it's sad. So I'm helping him move the next crappy washing down a flight of steps, and he says his back is hurting him. So I said, Billy, I'll take care of it. I will do another thing for you so that you can continue your irresponsible behavior because you fucking don't take care of it. You show up with a fucked up bad back and no help and some crackpot idea of how to spend 4 hours of my Sunday. It's a joke. So I said, Billy, stop. I'll take care of it. He says, no, we've got to get this in. You've got to stand there. And it's like, do I want to have a new fight with my landlord about the fact that he wants to continue, blah, 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 blah? It's fine. Well, we continue this fucked up protocol. I'm below this washer machine on these concrete stairs. And the thing comes loose, tumbles down into me, and I tumble 360 degrees, more than 20 feet down the stairs and land on concrete and break the first bones in my body I've ever broken. Because I don't want to get in a fucking fight with an emotionally illiterate landlord over nothing that he will blow up into, you don't like this, move out of the house. You don't like this, move out of the house. It's the same message. You don't want to be beaten as a 5-year-old, move out of the house. You don't want to deal with my crackpot idea of appliances with a broken back, blah, 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 up flights of steps. Move out of the house. I'll take do this, this. And it is so fucking sad. I do anything wrong with him, it's like, oh, I'm going to sue you for that, da-da-da-da-da. He sees me go down the stairs over this, fucked up thing. There's no offer to, pay the expenses or anything like that. This will cost me around $10,000, out of pocket, for another fucking reason. I had Kaiser Health Insurance until about 4 months ago. And every fucking time I would engage with them, I would deal with the same thing. First of all, my doctor shouts at me. She's a woman, but she shouts at me. I couldn't find a better one. I don't like fighting to talk tenderly, which is what I want in a healing profession. I want someone who is tender. Well, the medical world, the way we've set it up, destroys that tenderness. And so after, I won't go into the entire runarounds, but they are no more or less absurd than any of the others. I just decide no more paying $450 to be shouted at and told the wrong things and have things get worse and blah, 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 blah. Let's find something else. Well, my assistant is prioritizing all of these websites, etc., about high. So despite giving him a project to find me catastrophic health insurance, 3 fucking months ago, he keeps, dealing with all the emotions that come up almost every day with high, because I look at my life and I say, today would be 300% different if it weren't for this sexual abuse and this trauma. I hired these people to fix this. Instead, they made it worse. Now I can't even trust therapists. Well, how easy does that make it to find a new therapist? I've already paid therapists to fix therapists. And now I'm dealing with therapists to fix therapists to fix therapists. The constellation therapist that I hired to fix high started acting all weird. Then when I tried to confront him about it, he wouldn't respond. That's a therapist, charging $150 an hour in this case. So I'm just tired of the dysfunctionality of therapy. So I put up a website and I say, look, this is your therapeutic protocol. So here's a nice website that clients, when they search for your names, these are your emails to me. These are your silences. These are my emails. This is what it's like to do healing work with you. Well, he's furious about this. He says, I can't work with you because you're a pedophile. I said, do you care to elaborate? He said, maybe I'll make a website and call you a pedophile. I said, do you care to elaborate? Exactly what it is. It's like, aha, so that's some of your weirdness. You think I'm in the sex business, is that it? Why the fuck didn't you ask about it? But, so there's a whole weirdness now. So now I've got, attack from another therapist while trying to heal the abuses from the Human Awareness Institute, while trying to heal the abuses from home, while trying to heal the abuses in the culture, trying to heal the abuses in women, because I don't want to abuse and I don't want to be abused. But it's pretty difficult to extricate oneself with all this going on. So I'm now out 4 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, $10,000. I still don't have a washing machine because, be way too intelligent to just go get one and have it delivered. And there will be no apology from my landlord, even in this situation. I don't think he'd say move out of the house, blah, 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 blah. He might. People are testy that way. And so it's easier to make the money, despite, down, business and clients and stuff it is, than to try and get Billy to be sane. I'm back in that crevice again as a 5-year-old boy, not liking the situation, knowing that there is not a single person I can call to say this to. There is not a single person. Oh, I can find a new therapist who will sit and take notes about this. But then, when I paid one therapist more than $90,000 to sit and take notes for more than 900 hours, and this sexual abuse came up with High, and I said, I need help, and I'd like you to advocate for me, he said, I'm scared of these folks. I don't want to do it. So I'm left with nothing. Because then we come to the men of this culture. I've asked more than 40 men to be conscious and intentional friends, to invest some real time. One said yes, and for a year we had a great friendship. The others all said, oh, let's be friends, but let's not do any of the things that would make the friendship meaningful. Let's not spend quality time, let's just be friends. Let's not talk about feelings, let's just be friends. Let's not support each other in key projects, let's just be friends. In other words, let's be complete dissociative assholes to one another and just put the label friends on it. And that's your idea of a great male-male relationship. Yeah, that's it. That's what I want. You want to be my friend? That's not a friend. I hate to break it to you. That's not a friend. I don't know what it is, but maybe a friend would tell you that that's not friendship, that that's just polite conversation that means nothing except that it can cause damage because it can give you the false idea that we actually are friends. It's just a setup for betrayal then, because then we say when something meaningful happens, oh, all my friends abandoned you. They were never your friends. But now that you need something and they don't want to give it, well, they disappear. That's what I experienced a lot of with my acquaintances. I never called them friends, but my acquaintances all, vanished rather than respond to the High dynamic. Because it takes work to build anything. And in our culture, we'll work for a car, we'll work for a house, but for a friendship, for a marriage, that comes in second, third, fourth. After the addiction, after looking good, after the house, etc., then we'll find some time to build the most important thing in our entire life, human relationships. We'll find some time in the cracks to do the most important. How is it the most important thing in your life if you fit it in the cracks? Well, you're out of it. We're not going to fit you into a crack because you're disagreeable. You don't go along with the thing. Aha, I don't even fit into a crack with telling the truth. I used to fit into a home if I would lie. Now I don't even fit in a crack unless I would lie. It's just again and again. So yes, my bone is in pain, and it is numb and throbbing and horrible. The socket in the elbow snapped off from the bone, and then the socket turned. So it's out of whack and causes pain unless my arm is perfectly straight and is in 7 pain with it straight. And none of that begins to touch the pain, the grief, the sadness of growing up in this culture, in a world that doesn't want to see the pain, the grief, and the sadness, and that bribes and begs me on a regular basis not to talk about the pain, the grief, and the sadness, and where the different people who participate in creating that just hurriedly go away when something goes wrong rather than wanting to learn and grow and make something right. Thank you for your attention. The Broken Elbow Diaries, Part 2. What has shifted since my second day in hospital and my first broken bone? 2 broken bones, breaking a fall. Well, there's a part of me that expects something to be different. I can still see myself, which is nice. It's a part of me that's emerging in the midst of what I would call my grief, my rage. I can still see myself, who I am, where I'm going. Nothing wants to flow here, so I want to go up. I want to go up to my mother, and there's some wrestling part up there. Some dark, wild wrestling part that does not want me to speak. Let's see. I can't find a voice that's unique in this moment with this pain, so let's see what's... Day 3 of the Broken Elbow Diaries. Didn't say my... Well, I'm not going to lift up my cast, it's too painful. But I just want to review what's fucked up about healthcare in the current place. So, first of all, I got injured because of 2 reasons. Let me have a chalk. The first region is the first wound. So this is the childhood wound of emotional unavailability. Now, what this means is that in relative isolation, meaning my parents thought it was a good idea to isolate from the culture, in relative isolation, with 2 emotionally unavailable parents, there's a large part of my childhood psyche that is desperate and lonely, and that wants emotional connection. Now, maybe it's a bigger section than this, but of all the part of me that wanted to emotionally connect, there's a very tiny part that actually got to meet that need for deep emotional connection. So this creates incredible loneliness. Of course, incredible loneliness doesn't heal when you have emotionally unavailable parents in isolation. And so the incredible loneliness continues and becomes somewhat chronic and to some extent an identity of loneliness and fear. The identity of loneliness and fear, created by all the invisibility and lack of emotional connection and the lack of repair, means that in the larger framework of my life, going into the pit of that pain and loneliness is one of my worst nightmares. So this is the first pivot, towards avoiding the pain of being alone, lonely, criticized, punished, and hated by people around me. Now, the fact that this is such a key need means it becomes a pivot point in many interactions, meaning my need for emotional connection is greater than my need for sanity. So I let insane people go along with an insane version of reality if I understand that pushing the point of sanity is actually going to challenge their acceptance of me. The sense of anger and attack and criticism and argument, etc., but it's mostly associated with emotional coldness, means that I back off on fights that are not very healthy, but which avoid me being fought. And so I'm now kind of navigating life to a fair extent, seeking this particular need. So as different relationships engage with this, it's a primary pivot point. Now, no fucking therapist sitting there and being paid $150 an hour is going to heal this depth of need. Because, first of all, they wouldn't be there without the $150 an hour. And secondly, because it's too great to feel in a 50 fucking minute session. Go into your deepest pain, your deepest grief and dissociation, and then just turn it off again 50 minutes later. It's not how it works. It's not how it's worked for me. I tend to notice, the sadness and the grief of that incompatibility and just see how far I can push a therapist to engage emotionally. I've pushed it to 2-hour sessions rather than 50 minutes. I've done over $150,000 of therapy. I've tried to push it into domains where I could feel some satisfaction around that grief and that loneliness. But it's not enough, and the testy, defensive, materialistic, and sadistic nature of our culture comes to play around the elbow. Because my landlord has a sweet side, just like anyone. But he's also got a fucking cheap, sadistic, argumentative, absurd side. He won't buy new appliances, so they regularly go bad. He won't show up with help to replace his washing machines that go bad because he buys them used. And so I'm stuck lifting these heavy things up to help him because I want his emotional approval. But he doesn't know all that much about this, terrain. And I end up with a washing machine knocking me down a flight of stairs because I'm seeking this little pocket. And I'm most importantly seeking, please don't punish me. Please don't hurt me. Please don't attack me. And I'm asking this, I'm begging this from the different people around me, from clients, from employees, etc. And they feel this need and this begging, and they exploit it, and they push it. My landlord is abusive at times. Precisely because it goes so far as, I do him a favor after agreeing and do it for free and telling him I'm going to do him a favor and him agreeing with that it's a favor, and then he'll change his mind, ignore the emails, ignore ignore that it was a favor, and actually pretend that this is a big expense for him. And then he'll interrupt, arguing in that reality rather than the actual reality. And I just want to be liked. I just want to not be attacked again and knocked into this painful terrain. So I break my elbow. And there's so many situations where it would be so much easier to be healthier, to be bigger, to be saner, if I did not need emotional warmth to enter that terrain. But I do need emotional warmth because it was so cold, and because we're in such a cold culture, and because I don't want to go numb, and because having experienced that coldness and that numbness, the last thing that I want is to believe the bullshit that money or possessions or power, etc., is somehow more important than feeling welcome and present in my own body, loved and accepted for who I am emotionally. I don't want to deal with that. And I'm stuck in a fucked up cult. Because this emotional warmth is the one thing that, it comes down to attunement. It comes down to empathy. It comes down to a focus on feelings with attunement and a caring. And I get blamed. And I feel so heartbroken, and I just feel so broken around being blamed for what goes wrong. The landlord said he would come on time to cut down a tree that was going to fall on the house. He didn't show up. He didn't call. There's a level of cruelty and hostility that he doesn't want to acknowledge. And I feel myself being drawn in through this weak point and set up to fail. And it's a real vulnerability. It's a lifetime vulnerability, needing to be liked, needing to be validated in some way. And I feel so lonely. And it sets me up to be abusive with my wife. Because I'm dealing with a fucked up sociopathic dynamic of the medical system right now. A medical system that could come and look at me in my house, but that would be too kind and too intelligent. A medical system that could respond to what I need, but that would be too intelligent. I ask for an ambulance to help me up some difficult steps. They send a fire truck and an ambulance, and the guys start arguing upon arrival, which is the one thing I don't want to deal with. And then they ask me to walk up the steps, pushing me along, etc., worse than doing it myself. This isn't protocol. Get the fucking fire truck out of the way. Oh no, it's protocol. Fuck your goddamn protocols. I'm sick of it. They want me to walk 100 yards when I don't want to move, so that they can tell me to lay in a bed when I need to stay upright because of the angle of my broken bone. And again, yes, that would be better for you, but it's not protocol. I ask for my shoe 3 fucking times. My wife is the only one paying attention and listening. It's a complete and utter waste of time. And then they want to say, let us do our job. You're not doing your fucking jobs. It's a systematic message. You don't matter. Our protocols matter. And this is a devaluing message which ties in with the core wound. With the core wound around the body. This is a devaluing message that ties in with this core wound. I can't get my doctor on the phone. I can't get costs. I can't get collaboration on a good decision. I can't get straight information about when's the right time to do my surgery. I am completely fucked over by a system that has very little interest in my well-being. I can go down the breakthroughs and say, there's about 40% of it that makes sense, and 60% of it is damaging the very thing I need help with. What do I do in this situation? I feel terrified. I feel alone. Exactly what I don't want to be feeling. What do I do in this situation? I don't know. But I feel stuck at every level, and I feel in pain emotionally at every level. And I don't want to be taking it out on my wife. I don't want to be suppressing it. I don't want to be waiting on hands, on hands and knees and pins and needles, etc. on this. I want to know what's going on. And I feel the fucking cruelty of being set up to fail. And I can't count on myself to do something different. I can't count on myself to do something different because I'm stuck in this emotional map. Where I feel small, alone, and grief. And I feel constantly abandoned. I just feel so fucking tired. So fucking lonely. And I come up short over and over again because this need to be liked, etc., sets me up because I'm pretty competent on my own. So if I don't bow into this and bow into that and do all this bullshit, I'm pretty competent. Ah! But I'm scared. I'm scared of being all alone. So I have backup plans. That's what I'm dealing with. I can't get any fucking decent care out of Marin General, and I can't get fucking decent care out of Kaiser. You know, they sign up and then only to tell me that their surgeon is away, you know, for a fucking 2 weeks when my arm needs care immediately. It's like, what the fuck did I just pay you $2,000 for? I'm sick of it. I can't get fucking information! Fucking assholes. Well, we're just going to ignore that CAT scan until I find out what it actually costs. Which is, the whole fucking thing is set up again. I fucking hate them. Assholes.